Thanks. So welcome to my talk. This is the Service ScoreCard, so all about gamifying operational excellence. So a few things we're going to talk about today. Initially, what the problem is we're trying to solve and what led us to looking at this idea. An idea for a solution that we had, and then a quick tour of what we have created. So hopefully this is something where you can take away, maybe, well, I've got some screenshots, so you might be able to say, this could be something that I can build, or some ideas that might flow. Also, some lesson learns that we have, and then if I have time, some Q&A, but I'm pretty nervous, so I'm going to talk pretty quickly, so I suspect we'll have a lot of time for questions. So a little bit about me. I am Danny Lawrence. I like to hack away on problems, but more to the point, I like to hack away on things that aren't problems. So my tagline on LinkedIn is that if it's not broken, I'll fix it. I'm a Python programmer from Australia, also a sysadmin, but I'm on loan as an SRE to LinkedIn. Currently, I'll look after the jobs, companies, and recruiter things, and a bunch of other stuff as well. So lots of stressful things there. And I also like to find encoding errors with my little snowman. But good news, my SREcon pass managed to get the snowman on there. So I'm pretty happy with that. All right, some terms to talk about. Just some of the terms that I'm using might be LinkedIn terms, so I'm just trying to make sure that we're all on the same page about what I'm talking about today. So operational excellence, I'll start with a bit of a textbook definition there. So it's all about being effective and as efficient as possible with all the information and technology service that you use. And so that is all those services then being required by the users so they get some measurable benefits out of it. What we're going to use for operational excellence is a little different. It's basically doing everything as possible to make the services as reliable and quickly and work as efficiently as possible. And hopefully influencing everyone else along the way. So this difference might be between the operational and the reliability excellence. The other one, gamification, this is simply just stealing things from all the video games that I love and trying to sort of hide them in ops things and other stuff to try and basically get people a little bit more engaged with the sort of things that we're doing. So a little bit of background, so this makes a little bit more sense. So think of this as your crash course to LinkedIn SRE. So our services are mostly Java, and there is a lot of them in production. And they end up doing a lot of different things. We run a service-oriented architecture, not quite microservices, and it's all powered by an open source framework called Rallies. So this, yeah, everything talks to everything, which makes it a little bit more complex. And my team looks at about 80 services, and we have about 200 SREs. So the problem that we had, or the thing that started this whole thing and inspired this talk, basically, there's good services and there's bad services. The bad services are the ones that wake me up at night, interrupt me when I'm doing my work, all that sort of thing. And I'm sure you can all think of like the shitty services that you look after. Good services, on the other hand, they let me sleep. They're excellent. They don't interrupt me when I'm doing my thing, and I can go ahead and just do my thing and not get interrupted. Some of the problems that you might be thinking of is, what are some of my good services? These can be a little bit harder to remember which ones they are. And there's a sub-problem here is what makes a good service at LinkedIn, especially probably where you're working as well, it's a moving target. So what was good a few months ago might not necessarily be good now. This is mostly because technologies and dependencies change a lot over time. So we use a lot of dependencies, they have bugs, we need to update them. Quick example here is this is just some of the things I've needed to change since working at LinkedIn. So we're talking about upgrading core libraries, Jetty, Java, Play, making sure that TLS is configured correctly, changing over databases, changing over code repositories, fixing up startup times, a host of things we'll always be changing. And even worse than that is a good service can turn bad on you if you're not checking it. Which happens because the bad service are the ones that are a problem, so they end up getting most of the attention. And really, unfortunately for you, bad services rarely magically turn good. So they can magically turn bad, but not the other way around. So that brings us to the other problem of knowing what is bad. Just because it's being annoying to you or waking you up, that's not the only ones that are bad. Things where you've got a silent problem there of some misconfiguration, they're also a problem. And then not only knowing what's bad, but why it's bad. You might have a Jetty 9 bug that you need to upgrade, otherwise it will take out production, but something like that would never happen. And the other thing is knowing how to transform a bad service to a good service is a lot of the time lost in tribal knowledge, and it's very hard to sort of communicate how to move that bad system into a good state. And one thing I've learned over the last 13 years of being a sysadmin is there's only seems to be one thing we hate more than not having documentation. And unfortunately, that's writing documentation. So, in summary, bad services wake me up, good services let me sleep. Knowing what is bad, why it's bad, and how to fix the bad, that's the problem that we're trying to solve. So let's have a look at the solution that we came up with. So this is the Service ScoreCard. It's basically trying to tackle all the problems I've had at every job, but this job has been the one that's let me explore the solution. So the idea is to find a whole bunch of these requirements that we would determine what was a good or a bad service. Then we apply a weight to these services, these checks or these requirements. Some are more important than the others. So configuring TLS, a little bit more important than making sure you've got like the latest minor version of an upgrade library. So we apply a weight to all of these. The tricky bit next is we go ahead and codify all of these little requirements that we have. So if you've used something like Nagios before where you have like small little checks, that's the sort of thing we're building, but for more on the operational excellence side than like sort of just checking a full file system, that sort of thing. Then what we do is we've got all these checks, we want to execute them all for every service that we have. So as you can imagine, that ends up being a lot of checks and a lot of services. We tally up the results if it passed or failed those checks. And then with the weights, we can basically come up with two numbers. The maximum possible score you could have achieved, and then the score that you actually achieved. Then we go ahead and turn that into percentage. And then what do you know? We can turn that into a grade. So now we can take a service and turn it into an F or an A+. Now we can put all of those grades and services into a high score system. And this is where it starts to become very fun. Because once we have that high score system for all the services across the company, we go ahead and publish all those scores to the company. So suddenly everyone's very aware if you're doing very badly or very well. So this ends up triggering a lot of conversations, as you might imagine. But these are conversations we wouldn't normally get to have about reliability, operability, trying to get the best sort of performance out of things. Basically, anything we're checking, we can now have a conversation about, and everyone's very motivated. I work with a lot of good people, so most of the time the answer isn't sort of getting angry at me for telling you that you've got a failed service. It's, this is great, how can I get my grade better? How can I improve my score? Or most of the time it's, I want to check something extra into this thing. So what makes a check? So this is some ideas of how you might want to implement this if it seems interesting. So we've got two types of plugins. We've got some fetch plugins. They go ahead and just gather up all the information we can possibly find. And then some check plugins. They basically check the information that we've gathered. So when it comes to fetching things, we basically go across to all the infrastructure we have and try and pull in everything into one giant sort of blob that we have. So SVN, Git, config databases, host databases, monitoring system, everything. Basically, if it listens on TCP, we've gone ahead and fetched that data. Then what we do is we build a giant context object. So this makes it a little bit easier to check in the future. So then we can run all the checks against them. So the plugins, the checks themselves, they just look at that context object. So they become very quickly to run and very easy to write and debug. So how easy to write? Most of them are around sort of 10 to 30 lines of code of Python, which is pretty good. We turn a handful of things, very much like Nagios. Did it pass? Did it fail? True or false? None if we're skipping it, if it doesn't apply. And then we also have a sort of floating point where we can use to track a percentage. Then a little message to give a hint to the user to know if it's, what they should be doing if it's failed. And then a context object to keep building that up. So we can have a quick look at a fetch plugin. So we tag it with an ownership for sort of searching and reporting purposes. This one is for fetching ownership, so the only thing we pass in is a service name. We go ahead and hit ownership API to fetch our ownership for that particular service, and then we'll pass back all that information back in. So that is sort of like our building up our example fetch for getting ownership. So you might ask, why don't you just do the check and that? A lot of the fetch plugins we do, they'll gather sort of a bunch of things, and then we'll have lots of different checks. So that helps sort of guide the user where to go from there. So a quick look at a check plugin. Again, the weight that we talked about before, we apply a weight to that, sort of 0 to 20. Generally, higher weight means it's going to affect your score more, so they're the ones you can influence people to go after first. Another tag then, just for reporting and filtering. We put a wiki link page in there to try and sort of hint the user at how to fix the problem. And then we start the check, passing in that context object that we built before. Just very simply making sure that we have an engineering team for this particular service. If we do, awesome, that's a pass. If we don't, you've failed, and we tell you you've got a missing service team, and you miss out on your 5 points. So we've had a look at a bit of the code. Let's have a bit of a look at the screenshots, because hopefully that will sort of bring together what we've been talking about. And we'll have a go over some of the problems and how those screenshots address those problems. So the problems we talked about were knowing why, what, and how to fix badness, basically, and getting to good. So let's start with knowing what is bad. So this is the interface that we built. So if you work at LinkedIn, you punch in, get to the interface, this is what you're greeted with. Go ahead and I can throw my own name into that search bar and then click search. And this has found all the people that start with my name. Fortunately, my name is fairly popular, so I get lots of results. But we can also search for services, teams, departments, anything that we've gathered. I click on my icon, and that takes me to the high score that we talked about before. So this is my personal view of how well I'm going. So lots of information there. At the top, a little title bar there showing everything about me or who I've searched for. And all the bottom is all the high scores that I have. So we first start with the ownership, so showing the SR team that looks after the service, the engineering team, and then the service name, the grade that you're currently running, or that we've ran in the last 24 hours, and then a percentage score of how well you're tracking. So this can sort of let you know if you were to get the most value out of your time, to start at the bottom of the list, because they're probably going to be the problem services. So that gives you a hint of what is bad. The next one is knowing why is bad. So if we take that view that we had before and go ahead and look at just a single service, we can actually click on that guy, and that will take us to the view of our single service. So this is everything you sort of need to know if you're looking at a service. So this can actually be really useful if you're on call and you want to look up another team, another service, to see how well is that going. Are they anticipating having problems if you're getting a low grade? So again, we've got a little header information. The most important thing there is the grade. So this one, not doing fantastically, but not too bad. But the service itself that runs all the check actually gets an A+, so I'm happy with that. The name of the service, a little bit of breakdown of how we got to the score and how long we run it. And then keeping a history track of everything, how well it's gone. All the checks that we have, the name of the plugin that we built, if it's passed or failed in the red or green, and how many points they're worth, and then a little message that we sort of constructed before, as well as the filtering and tagging. So you can click on those and do filtering. This can be really useful if you're going after a certain theme, like deployments or ownership. So the good news there, we have the what and the why, now the how. So if we take the results from this jobs server that we were looking at before, and we can choose one sort of theme. So this here, we've looked at ownership. We're going to have a look at one of the checks, which is the engineering ownership, which is the code we looked at before. And let's pretend it's broken. I'm doing my job, so I've got a green there, so we'll just pretend. So if I click on that message, what it will actually use is that wiki decorator from before and take us to a Confluence page, which this is showing us how to fix that check. So hopefully it's not like monitoring systems where every now and again you get that alert. It's like, I've never seen this before, I don't know how to fix it or how important it is. We're going to call out exactly why this check is firing, why it's important, how long we think it's going to take to check. Because we know these are a lot of the times they're config things, we've got a lot more of this data. And then, most importantly, how to fix this issue. So if you might have noticed that we've got some curly braces around some of the server names. What that actually is a hint that there's a templating system at play here. So what we did was use a bit of Angularjs in our wiki page to try and help out. So what we can do is basically turn service name into the actual server name. So when you're looking at how to fix this, it becomes very easy to understand. So that's that example again, but none of this silly your name here or $server name stuff. So in that same thing is everything from that context object we built before, that's also available in the wiki, which makes it very easy to use. So anything we've fetched, we can use. So no more of that service name stuff. The only thing that we found was Confluence doesn't have Angularjs, but it does let you inject HTML. So we just sort of added an extra library in there. Don't tell our security team. Now we have Angularjs. This is just a little bit of a code snippet to show what we do, fetching the service name out of the query string. And then what we do is we look up from our API to build out that context object. So now everything in our scope we have available. So not only does getting the ownership work, but anything else we want to build sort of dynamic documentation we can do through this system, which is very handy at 3 o'clock in the morning. So hopefully we've addressed those 3 problems. So we've got the reports that show us what's bad, checks to validate why it's bad, and a wiki that shows us how to fix things. And hopefully it tries to eliminate this email that we get. Hey, if you use this library, you might be affected by this bug. That creates so much work for everyone because you never know if you're actually using that library anymore. Where now we have a reporting interface where if checking that library was a check, that could be one of the things that I could track here. It's like, I'm 100% green for this particular library, no work on my side, which makes it very useful if you're implementing the solution or if you're tracking that overall project. I'm just going to skip this next bit for time, and we're going to have a look at a bit of results and outcomes. So what do we do with these scores? We spent a whole bunch of effort gathering all these scores. What can we do with this information? Initially getting the grade higher, that was the #1 priority. We noticed that higher graded services, A+, generally cause less work, so we want more of them. So that's what we went after. So generally, in our group, we've raised our score from 40 to 80%. SRE as a whole, we've gone from 35 to 60%. So we're definitely trending in the right direction. And we're doing a lot of checks now. So one way a lot of things we've been thinking about ways to explore these scores is basically the carrot and stick model. So the good services, they go ahead and get the carrots. The bad service or the bad service owners, they get the stick. So these are some other ideas that we've had. So one of them is reducing the support for F-grade services. If it's not worth the engineering time to level up the grade, then it might not be worth my time to look after the service. And F-grade services generally cause the most problems. So as we level them up, we become able to iterate on them faster and fix those problems. So that's a really good outcome for us. One of the other carrot things is we have deployment moratoriums. So maybe the A+ services don't get affected by those moratoriums anymore. And they generally cause the least amount of problems. So we're pretty confident that if that was the case, we'd be able to do that. Allow the A-grade services to deploy whenever they want to deploy. We've got a lot of trust, so let's embrace it. This is a new idea. If this triggers anyone's thoughts, let me know. But doing the premium support for A+ services. We don't actually know what that would be yet, but I'm in the hallways, hit me up. One of the other things is trying to tap into that builds. The build system is slow. Having a priority queue for good services, we can sort of tap into that conversation. Like, hey, if you up your score, your builds will go faster. One of the other ways we've thought of addressing the F-grade scores is coming up with tiger teams to just go after those problems. We know they're the problems, so we can spend engineering effort to hit them and sort of level up the score. The other thing we thought about was like hack days to sort of share knowledge to sort of bring up that score. Because they're all nice and sort of self-contained, that's something we can actually just teach anyone to fix. And free beer, probably the most useful tool that we have. In my experience, basically anything can be solved by offering someone a free beer, or t-shirts, or stickers. I had a lot of fun making these. One of the more important things we thought of doing was actually influencing the headcount. If we know that a team or a department needs a lot more operation attention, maybe that's where we should be allocating the SREs. And it's also a very simple way of getting things done. If we wanted to track a description for every single service we have, we can just make that a score. And everyone that will see their grade will drop from an A+ to an A, want to know why, and will go after it. So no more of these sort of crazy emails. So some takeaways. Everyone cares about reliability. Initially, we thought we'd have to sort of really go after the stick with a lot of people that are outside of the engineering team, outside of the reliability team to go after reliability things. But at heart, everyone's an SRE. You just need to empower them to be able to contribute to your reliability, and they will. The other thing, hack days, super important. This was built in an afternoon, and it's one of the things that sort of makes me get up and have a smile on my face when I know that hack day is coming around the corner. One of the other things is getting the data was super easy. Finding something useful to do with the data, that was very difficult. And probably the biggest thing is make it as easy as possible to do the right thing. People are lazy, so if you make the right thing the easiest thing to do, that will become the default, and then everything will sort of become better from there. Cool. Cheers. That's all I had prepared. I think I've done. Oh, I've got 2 minutes left. Wow. So. Yeah, 1 or 2 questions. There's a microphone there if there are questions.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm Brad from PayPal SRE. I think this is really cool. You mentioned assigning weights to all these things, and it seems like you would want some eventual closed loop between customer impact and financial impact to the customer. You would want to set the weights in a way that best correlates good results with good customer experiences.
Absolutely. So one of the things that will carry a lot of weight is something like we will check availability, a number of errors that are generated or exceptions. The other thing is we tap into our incident management system, or the code is there, it just needs to be committed. Tapping into the incident management system. So if these things are causing customer escalations, that's going to lower your grade. So hopefully that sort of helps with that sort of thing.
Is that a manual process for you, or is there a thought of trying to automate that?
So when we have those problems, generally we post-mortem everything we can possibly post-mortem, and a lot of the times that comes out of that. So there's a manual component to it, but I think that helps get the right answer. It'd be awesome if it can be automated though.
Cool, thank you.
Cheers.
How do you make sure you're taking care of your customers when you remove support from failing services?
So that was one of the ideas that we had. So we haven't actually had to go through the removing support. We actually found that everyone was just more than happy to just turn orange into green and red into orange. So we haven't had to bring out the sticks yet. I think that would be a challenge. A lot of the stuff that I look after is revenue generating. So people would be pretty pissed off if I said, go away, I don't want to support you because of some arbitrary tool. But I think the threat there, that helps.
Thank you.
Hey, Deb Kent with PayPal. What is your time frame from beginning to end to get all this information? And how does the PD teams that might own some of this know this is the snapshot of time that you're talking about?
So our checks run every 24 hours. So most of the time that's good enough. I mean, it's not like a real monitoring system where you want to react really quickly. We have a little button in there that lets you click it and rerun things and gather all the data. So that sort of feeds into that instant gratification of I just fixed this thing. How high did I get my grade? So we see that pattern happen a lot, which that's exciting to see. Walking through the office floor and seeing something you've built on someone's desk and sort of using it as intended.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Let's all thank.